Good evening, everyone. I'm Harry Boomer. Welcome to this special panel discussion, the WOIO Cleveland Public Library Next 400 Digital Roundtable. Our guests are former Cleveland Brown star Josh Cribbs, a multimedia sports reporter, and filmmaker Branson Wright. We're going to discuss the treatment of Black athletes in today's media and the impact it has beyond the field or the court. There is an old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We all know that is not true. And I think we can all agree to that. However, people still hurl insults and mischaracterizations, often based on racial and gender stereotypes of athletes of color and women. Now, these gentlemen are going to talk frankly about that. The Cleveland Public Library, the People's University, has partnered with WOIO to help us better understand the harm and the hurt caused by attitudes and tones and actions that actually injure the soul. So, Josh, let me start with you. Tell us a bit about yourself. I always say that you can tell me better than I can read a bio. So, tell me briefly about who Josh Cribbs is, and then Branson will do the same with you, and then we'll get into the meat of our discussion. By the way, welcome and thank you.
Oh yeah, awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm a husband of 20 years. I am a father of two. My oldest being a 19-year-old sophomore at Kent State University, and my youngest being an eighth grader at North Robeson. I'm a three-time NFL Pro Bowler, four-time Hall of Fame nominee. I'm trying to get in. Um, all-decade return specialist. All the football accolades out there. I want to believe I'm an awesome father and a husband who's doing my best every single day. So that's who Josh Cribbs is, a person in the community. I try to be the same person that I am off the field, in the classroom, at home. I try to be the same person I am behind closed doors that you see in public.
And you also have your own TV show with your wife, Maria. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, definitely. We have Cribs in the CLE, a show that comes on twice a day. Once on 9:30 a.m. on CBS 19, and then again at 6 on the CW 43. Um, my wife co-stars with me. It's an opportunity now that she's the star. Everybody, when they come up to me to meet me and or meet her, they say, "Oh, you that football guy." Yeah, you're Maria Cribbs' husband. And so she gets to be the star, which she rightfully is, of the show, and I get to sit back and be the sidekick for once. So it's an awesome dynamic. I'm enjoying this part of my life to the fullest, and I have a huge ton of life experience. I feel that I live because of my NFL career.
Well, we're going to pull on that life experience and all of that in the NFL and having played football and still been intricately involved in the game in other ways. Branson, your turn. Tell us who Branson Wright is.
Well, I'm surprised that Josh forgot about the show, which is my favorite local show on television. I'm a big fan, Josh.
Thank you.
Besides being a fan of Josh and his lovely wife and his outstanding NFL career, he should be in the Hall of Fame. I wish I had a vote, Josh, but I don't.
All right. On occasion, we will have a dropout here and there. Branson is actually in the nation's capital in a hotel room, and the Wi Fi is not up to snuff all the time. He'll be in and out as the Wi Fi will let him, but we look forward to getting him back. Branson is a brother who has, there he is right there. Hey, Branson, welcome.
Hey. So sorry about that, about the Wi-Fi. So I'll talk fast. I'm Branson Wright, former sports writer at the Plain Dealer for 20 years. Now I've been a filmmaker for the past 10 to 12 years. Sports documentaries has been my niche. I'm co-producer of Believe Land and producer of Women of Troy. Was recently on HBO. I have another film that's out right now that deals with high school football rivalries and prostate cancer awareness. That film is called King of the Block. Stay tuned for that on one of your streaming services. Been married for 20 years, have 3 children, 2 grown daughters, and 1 sophomore at Hawken. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to be here with you 2 gentlemen right here, and for those out there watching and listening.
Well, thank you for that. Gentlemen, let's jump right into the meat of it all here. We're here to talk about something that most people don't like to talk about, and that is race as it intersects with sports. We all know that being Black men, we have an extra burden to bear. I tell people that my color is my blessing and my burden. I deal with them both as best I can. God knew what he was doing, and hopefully I'll learn to do what he put me on the planet to do. So, Josh, being a football player, former football player, but all the accolades that you get, I know that it has not been easy. Talk about the attitudes you've run into and how it impacted you and how you see it impacting on players today when it comes to how we are treated, mistreated, disregarded, or whatever.
Well, I think at a lot of levels, we begin to be ill-equipped with financial literacy and the knowledge of finance. A lot of time we don't have the opportunity in our sporting career because, just look at the NFL. I came in at 21 years old, fresh out of college, not really trying to think about finances as opposed to I'm trying to stay on the football team. So the lack of financial knowledge and understanding how the world works, you're just out there, one track mind, thinking, I want to play football. And it's easy for the game of football to take advantage of, not just the Black players, but all its players when they don't understand the financial part of it, which is huge. And, we kind of get characterized. We had this conversation before. Society is alive and well in sports. So I'm gonna say that again. Society, and when I say society, I mean all of society's issues seep into the sporting world, whether it be how we're talked to by people, the stereotypes, all type of stereotypes, from our intelligence all the way to the food we eat. Whatever society tells us to believe about certain groups in society, it's alive and well in the sporting world. Now, I've heard that both as a player, I've witnessed it, and as a coach. So, it's many different examples via speech, how we're talked to. Say for instance, how announcers announce us, how they speak when we're, completing a task or doing an ability. How they announce quarterbacks, Black quarterbacks, as opposed to Black athletes, as opposed to our counterparts, maybe a white athlete. The way that announcer may, say, how I ran it, as opposed to another. So those society stereotypes and society issues has found its way deeply rooted in the sports community.
Years ago, those who are basketball fans, not to get off into another sport necessarily, but just to make this point, I remember hearing oftentimes when Magic was playing and Larry Bird was playing, Magic was thought of as being a natural athlete with all these natural abilities, and Bird was thought of as the intelligent player. And so I think that's kind of what you're saying here is that we are regarded as natural athletes, but we don't think. And I tell people all the time, this finger here does that because my brain is telling it to. That's not a reflex reaction. That's a signal from my brain saying, move your finger, boomer.
It's
Okay.
saying I have
So,
intelligence.
yeah. So if my body is leaping higher, running faster, shooting well, it's because my brain, i.e. intelligence, is telling it to do it. So
Yeah.
talk to them about that.
Yeah. And, let's just dive right into it, and a lot of times, and I love this discussion because it teaches, for our white brothers and sisters that, may be ignorant to the fact of, what's a stereotype or what's wrong, what's misspoke, what should be qualified as, you misspoke, you shouldn't have said that. So, terms like class act, Notice when the class act is used. And it goes along with saying, that a black athlete is well spoken. Let's see the differentiation. Are we saying that to our white players as well? Do we say, all the white players, oh, he speaks well? A lot of times, if you notice this, and maybe people don't notice that now, they will. If you notice when the term, well spoken comes up, it's usually talking about a black athlete. It's as if we're not supposed to be speaking well, as if it was a surprise. Like, oh man, I expected you to be speaking slang. I expected some different type of language, as opposed to being grammatically correct. So the class act, the natural player that you mentioned, Harry, is all as if Magic was talked about his skill that comes out of nowhere. His athletic, his toughness is always relating to a physical ability, as it couldn't possibly be. I prepared mentally for this, so I'm in the right place because I had my intelligence to tell me, hey, I know I've watched film. He's going to be over here, so I'm going to. It's always my physical ability, my athleticism, as opposed to the mentality. So if we notice those different nuances, then we can be more prepared and see things clear.
Yes. And Branson, you have been writing and wrote about sports and athletes for 20 years for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. And I know you have seen and heard. Talk from your perspective as a sports writer, as a sports viewer. If you, like most of us, probably played sports as well, from the perspective of what you've seen and heard and what you think about the whole different treatment of black athletes versus that of white athletes.
This earlier in the week. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
We talked about this earlier in the week, and as Josh alluded to, about sports being a reflection of society, and not only in athletics, but in all walks of life, in journalism. As I've earlier in my career, I would go to a high school game, go into a press box with my reporter pad and tape recorder, and I was asked what was I doing up there. Knowing, from someone's impression that we can't write, or how could you be a journalist? How could you be other than what they perceived for me to be? So it's simply a reflection of society and stereotypes and what people think of you or us. And as I said to you before, Boomer, about the study in the 80s when they had people that were blind, and they listened to a sports broadcast, and they were close to 100% in determining what race that these broadcasters were talking about. So it's
the language they used, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Athleticism. This guy is really smart. Oh, he hustles, and they could determine who they were talking about. So, for me, and I hate to make it simple about it is what it is. Our grandparents have told us that we have to be twice as good. We have to work twice as hard, and that's for me and my family, that's accepted. That what we have to do to, I don't want to say prove, but to do the best that we can. And for those that don't see us in another light, or see us the way we should be seen, then we just have to continue to teach. From example.
You left half of that saying off. We have to work twice as hard to get half as much.
Right.
Don't forget about that part. And I know I'm sort of yanking your chain here a little bit, but I also want to invite those who are watching and listening. If they want to comment, they can post your comments in the comments section. I'll try to get to some of those. Time is going to run out here. We're just getting started, but I want to try to get back to this and invite people who have comments about it. If you've run into stereotypes, if you run into being called names, if you've been disregarded, not given your proper respect, your props, as we say. Josh, you talked about language. We're bilingual, at least bilingual, and we know when and how and not to use whenever we want to use slang or whatever else, because we come in, we live in two Americas, at least two Americas, and we have to understand how that impacts on who we are and what we do and what we can do and how we perceive ourselves and how people perceive us. Talk some about why it is so important to have a strong constitution, a strong sense of self-identity, so that when those verbal arrows come at you, you can deflect them as best you can.
And that's interesting you put it like that. I think it's knowledge of self and having that awareness. And it's us that, we'll have to teach the world. We'll have to teach the world about us, how not to be offended and about the knowledge that they're hearing from us, and then receive the knowledge themselves. So Branson said an amazing thing. And people might not understand the certain stereotypes. Then when that study he talks about, when you can hear a announcer talk about a black athlete, they say something like this. And when they talk about a white athlete, they say something like this. Well, that's for coaches as well. So it happens, and like we said in society, if, they judge you off of their stereotypes. So if I lose my mind in the game and get upset, then he lost it. He's a bad-tempered young man. For a white player, look at him. He's passionate. They immediately change the narrative as well because of these stereotypes. The black athlete is supposed to be, all passionate, losing his mind, short-tempered because he lacks the discipline. And the white athlete, when he loses it, he'll be, heralded more so because of his passion in the game. And we could talk, like my teammate, my former teammate, in the game, Ken Dorsey. He's the offensive coordinator, and he lost it in the booth because they lost the game. My wife was saying to me that no athlete, y'all represent so much. He couldn't act like this and be heralded. They don't want to teach kids like this, but people were saying that he was mad, he had passion. I found myself defending him, you see, and my wife, who doesn't have the football background, who saw from a third party looking in, why is he acting like, does he know people? She looked at it from a clear point of view. Even we as black athletes sometimes have to gain the necessary knowledge and involve our minds to understand right from wrong, because we're in this society, we're in this sport. We have to understand that we sometimes we adapt to the disparity between the two, and we'll just say between black and white. We adapt ourselves, like we become numb to certain things that we shouldn't be.
And we're not immune.
We're not immune. Absolutely.
We're not immune, because sometimes we will say things like, and I hate it when I go to barbershops and I hear somebody talk about a player. Oh man, he's a beast. Excuse me. I understand what you're saying, but do you understand what you're saying?
Right.
And it's how you regard a fellow brother as to what you say about him. He's animal. And see, again, we have been in this country over 400 years, thus the next 400. And we have been victimized by the language and the people and the actions and the saying as much as anybody. So we have to take time ourselves to sift out that bad and raise up the good. Otherwise, we find ourselves promulgating the very thing we dislike in others. Branson, your thoughts? And I have somebody from the chat I want to get in as well. Go ahead, Branson.
My thoughts are know your history, read about you, and those are some of the heroes before us. And when you can tell.
Okay, Branson dropped out again. Wi-Fi in DC. Must be the CIA, the FBI, the NSA. But anyway, let me just go to Secundra Beasley, I think. And she asked, he or she, I can't tell which, Are there education resources for Black children, adolescents who play sports, who are addressing the issues being discussed? Josh, are
Mm,
you aware of any? And Branson, when you get back with us as well, feel free to chime in.
there are, and it depends on, what school you go to. It depends on which programs you're involved in, because there are programs that a lot of volunteers are implementing within the school system, after school programs. But they're just not a lot of them recognized. I would say that, because yeah, it's just not a lot of recognized ones. Because there should be, ones that are so recognizable that, that question, they could say, okay, other than this, are there any more? There aren't any that are so recognizable that we know them, as a collective off the top of our head.
That makes a lot of sense. There's something, many of you will remember the name Carter G. Woodson when he wrote the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. And he talked about how we, as I alluded to a little while ago, we have to find ourselves sifting through the language to come up with the right language to describe ourselves and hold others accountable for the language they use in describing and or talking to us, because it is so crucial. And Branson, being a writer yourself, I know that you're on top of the kinds of things that are out there. Talk to me about why it is so important that we augment the education that we have, that we give to our children. We're one of the only people I know that don't, on the side, on a regular basis, augment what we teach our kids. We give them to a system that is failing them by and large, and then we say, well, I don't know why he or she doesn't achieve. Well, it's because they have not been augmented. That education about self, that critical race theory that everybody wants to run away from, we should be running to, saying this is what happened to you and yours back when, and that's how it is impacting on you right now, because nothing happens in a vacuum. Mr. Branson.
Not at all. And as I was saying about knowing your history and reading, I recommend every young person to read the autobiography of Malcolm X. For kids, it has everything that they think they like in there as far as his former life. But the fact that he was able to transform his life into something much more important is something that kids need to read about. Read about Paul Robeson. You talk about activism and Black athletes. Paul Robeson was the ultimate in activism. Paul Robeson was everything a person would want to achieve to be. He was an actor. He was a singer. He was a lawyer. He was a college football All-American. He excelled in so many things, which you hope that young people could see how they could achieve by looking and reading about some of these people. Will Roden wrote a book called $1 Million Slave, which is a great book to read, especially for athletes, to learn his perspective on just because you're getting paid still means you're a slave. If you succumb yourself to being a slave in that system, and as Josh was talking about, of having financial literacy, or if you don't have financial literacy, then you're going to be a slave. So there's so many books out there that young people and older people can read and definitely identify with when it comes to Black athletes and young Black students.
I find it so interesting that we have to, and Josh, thank you for bringing that up earlier about the financial literacy, because so many athletes who make millions and millions and millions of dollars end up broke than broke. And it's all because they haven't been taught. Again, it is the kind of thing that we have to find a way to augment ourselves, teach our children not just how to spend money and make money, but to how to use money to make money. And then that, takes us into another realm of how we are regarded, because money breeds money and it brings about a whole nother attitude, doesn't it?
Yes, and I have to touch on that. You know, we have to understand that with the schooling, every major ethnicity has its own schools, but us. We're widely giving our children to public schooling, where they don't teach our history, They don't teach our culture. They don't teach nothing about us. And we got to understand every other culture has that. You have, Catholicism, Catholics. They have Catholic school. Every school that you know of with saint in front of it. They teach their religion. They teach everything, for them. And, every ethnicity has its own school but us. So we have to start understanding. We have to teach our children. There have to be an education. Yes, we want critical race theory, and everyone's scared of that for knowledge. I don't know why we are so scared of that. Maybe guilt. But I say to those, who are, feel that there may be a guilt thing that keeps their children from them wanting their children to understand knowledge, is there were abolitionists in slavery. So all of our white brothers and sisters, they can identify with the abolitionists, the people on the right side of it, the people losing their lives trying to help the black people out. They were good people in slavery who didn't agree with slavery. They can identify with them. They don't have to necessarily, say, oh, my ancestors, because this is a chance that no matter what my parents did, no matter what my grandparents did, I have a chance to change my legacy, my family's legacy, from whatever it is. And if they come with that love, that appreciation first, and then things can work out from there. Now the financial part of it, we have to learn to, and this is again just with the education. We are the only, race that we don't keep the money within the black community. We spend with every other community, but every other community spends with themselves first.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the knowledge that we have to understand. We shouldn't have to go into black-owned restaurants and be critical of them more than we would in a white-owned restaurant. We wouldn't say the same thing. It's proven. In a black-owned store, we're critical of them, but we're not critical, before we spend our money with any other people. So we have to understand self, like you said, and the education and the financial literacy is just so huge for the black community.
I have a friend of mine who used to have the longest running public affairs program on television, Tony Brown, who said that the only color of freedom is green. And he said two things. Many blacks believe that a white man's ice is colder than a black man's ice, but all water freezes at 32 degrees. And he also said something that was just so crucial, and that is that, as you said, Josh, blacks spend their money outside of their communities. We don't spend $1 in our community one full time. Other communities 7, 8, 9 times before it leaves that ethnicity. He said if we spend like 93 cents out of every dollar in somebody else's community. And if by chance, how do we expect our community to be as prosperous as somebody else's community when we spend 93 cents out of our dollar in somebody else's community? That understanding buys legacy. It also buys self-esteem and how you regard yourself, because many of us don't think of ourselves as worthy because of 400 years of indoctrination, if you will. So we got to throw off that yoke, throw off that stereotype, and realize that, I come from the best because, only the strong survive the Middle Passages. Only the strong survive the vestiges of slavery. And we owe it to ourselves and to the nation and to the world to find a way to give back what we have been blessed to have. And the thing is, the first blessing is love thyself first, then love thy neighbor as thyself. I kind of screwed that around, but
no, you're preaching, Harry, and I'm gonna touch on it one thing, about if there's an insecurity that's bred into us, it's a reason why we need flashy rims. I used to have some. It's a reason why we need the flashy watches and the gold jewelry and the fancy cars. That it's a reason why we fancy material things. It's like that. It was so prevalent in the NFL. As soon as I made it, I wanted a truck. I wanted the rims. But the white athletes they drove the Toyota. None of them was buying Lexuses and fancy cars. But the black athletes were. I didn't really realize it while I was in it. And then as I matured, I'm like, I couldn't see myself with rims ever again. I want to invest in a house. I want to buy a property. They were already doing. They were already putting their money in businesses while we're trying to look like money. You know, billionaires don't walk around with ice and gold chains and rims. They look so average because their money is spent well. And so for us to have that, we have to have knowledge of self and have that self-awareness to not try to be, materialistic and show that we are money. We have to know we are.
I think we keep trying to say, Master, do you love me now? And he keeps taking all that we give and say, no, I don't, not yet. You haven't proven yourself worthy. But we know we're worthy because we have been, we brought, civilization, mathematics and medicine and numerology and all the things that we know about that we don't know about with critical race theory that people are running away from. And again, I say we need to run toward it as fast as we can. People say, well, I don't want my kids to end up thinking poorly of themselves or their ancestors. Does that mean that my children, my grandchildren, should for another 400 years think poorly of themselves because you don't want yours to know the truth? Can you handle the truth? Now, there is another question here, and do you feel there is a shift starting to happen in how Black athletes are covered due to the rise of more Black journalists and show hosts? Josh.
Yes, there is a shift happening. It's not as fast as we would like it, but there's a shift of knowledge. There's a shift of power. You can see it now in the NBA. And players are starting to make their niche, and they're making their voices heard with ownership. They're making their voices heard with control, and it's not happening as fast as we would like it because the best sports out there, the top rated sports are not owned by Black players, Black entities. They're 90% African American, 90% people of color, Black folks, but yet, our white counterparts own all of it for the majority. And it's not as if we want to turn that tide. It's the fairness and the equal of opportunity and the knowledge that we have to see what is actually going on, who is actually in control. So to have that knowledge of self, to have that knowledge of how things actually work, then the tide will continue to turn because it's starting to turn, and it's just turning with education, with us becoming aware. So things, even from the broadcaster on down to people that work behind the camera, behind the scenes, there's starting to be a shift. There's starting to be a turn. We would like it to go faster, but yes, it's the change is starting to occur.
Yeah, like Sam Cooke said, the change is going to come. It's been a long time coming, but it's going to come. I tell people often when I talk to them, when you see me for a minute 30 on TV, you see what I want you to see. I may cover something for 2 hours, 3 hours, but because of the dictates of the business, I have a minute 30 to tell you what happened. You see what I want you to see, but hopefully because of my experience and my intellect and my being fair and honest about what's going on, you get a true representation of what went on rather than some skewed point of view. So I try to add context and content. I try to give some perspective, not only who, what, where, when, and why, and how, but also how is it relevant to you? And we have to understand that we have to make whatever goes on in this country, in our lives, relevant to ourselves, our family, and to the country. And therefore, we will then turn that tide in terms of attitude, in terms of people understanding our aptitude, and we can then continue to rise. We are over time, Josh, but I want to give you time if you have a closing thought about how Black athletes are treated differently and how we can treat ourselves differently too, because sometimes we mistreat ourselves. Well, let's get back to the Black versus white, how we are mistreated and are disregarded oftentimes in society.
Yes, and I'll close with this. A lot of times, and I'm guilty of it myself. I'm glad my wife is such a force that she allows me to be honest with myself and sometimes she's forceful in allowing me to see myself as I am and all my faults. I'm guilty of the type of assimilation where, I am called openly, a class act, and not respond to them like, hey, don't, instead of a class act, just say, hey, I did a good job, or you did great, or use another word. Hey, let me give you another word. And I'm not teaching enough. I think as a better method, I will start to teach, and I hope my white friends, they can be receptive to learning, and not be upset with being corrected in love, because a lot of times it's just the ignorance of not knowing, because they've been doing it for so long, and this what's said when we talk about black athletes. We thought it was okay. Well, it's our opportunity in love to correct, to teach, because they'll never know. Nobody will never know how to teach you unless you how to treat you unless you teach them, and you teach them by just letting them know, hey, instead of talking about my athletic ability, hey, talk about my intellect. Talk about the choices I made, the critical choice I made in that situation that allowed me to have success. And that in turn will make the announcers better, the reporters better, when they start to address you as equals and not as two separate entities, as if we're both not from this earth. So that's all I had to say about the difference of, you know, black athletes and white athletes. There's a lot of teaching that still needs to take place. And sometimes it needs to come from our black athletes. We have to start speaking up for themselves, and it have to start with me as well.
And I think we all have a role to play in that regard. I remember a young man who ran for president in 1988, Jesse Jackson, said, "When you know better, you
To
must do
do
better.
better. Yep,
We must all do better."
absolutely.
Josh Cribbs, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. Thank you for your intellect. Thank you for what you do and what you've done, the example you set, and the life you live. Branson Wright, I want to thank you as well. To the Cleveland Public Library, thank you for being a partner with WOIO Channel 19. We are part of the People's University, and we're just so glad to collaborate with you and to be a part of you. Thank you for watching. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Peace, love, and forever.